this could be real today steps, and that is certainly one that makes you think it's going to happen. You're at that point, you know the closeout crew is getting ready to depart the pad shortly, and you know that you're going to be out there on your own with your crew waiting to go.
So we're going to do a little simultaneous watching SPACEX and making music at the same time, because why not?
All right, and in seat number 1 today is CREW-1 mission specialist Shannon Walker, who flew previously.
I really love the SPACEX stuff.
The International Space
It's
Station
very
spending
spacey.
163 days in space. Here's more on Dr. Walker, who will be the first woman to fly on a commercial orbital spacecraft.
So we'll keep it slightly in the background
I always wanted to
until
be
something like
I just
super
heard
interesting
that
happens.
when we first landed on the moon.
It's a very, I must say, it's a very diverse crew.
Me and my older sister out into the backyard.
It's pretty interesting.
And the moon was rising over our house, and they pointed up there and said, "We have people there." And even at 4, I thought that just sounded like the best idea.
We have been given the scientific knowledge, technical ability, and the material to pursue the exploration of the universe.
What are you fine guys doing this evening?
These great resources
Have you been checking out the SpaceX stuff before this?
I had seen a new class of astronauts that had been hired for the space
I'm
shuttle.
gonna keep the music a little mellow so we can have
What their qualifications were, and
some
just going
space
through
stuff happening.
I realized I can do that, and that was a big turning point. I'm Dr. Shannon Walker, as an astronaut, and I am getting ready to fly CREW-1 mission to the International Space Station.
Welcome to the stream.
Anytime you get a flight assignment, it's
We're making music while watching the SpaceX. Multitasking.
I spent 6 months on the space station previously in 2010, and I am so looking forward to getting back there and having another week on the space station. There's so many things that you can do on station. What I like about it is you get up, you may be doing a biological experiment one day, maybe doing maintenance on a rocket the next day, the day following that you're doing what I have found being part of the International Space Station program, and not just Russia, but colleagues in Japan and Europe and Canada, is underneath it all, we all have the same goals and we all have the same passion. The Dragon spacecraft represents to me is just a continuing evolution of that computing power that's evolved over the years in different ways that the crew can interact with the spacecraft. SpaceX is a very interesting company. There are so many young people. I always imagine it to be like it was in the early Apollo days, with so many young engineers so passionate about what they are doing. The important thing is we both have learned from each other, and now we've got a very strong bond on what we want to accomplish and how we need to accomplish it together. I do believe that human spaceflight is an imperative for our planet, and to be a part of that to keep the progress going, I find very inspiring.
CREW-1 mission specialist Soichi Noguchi has spent 177 days in space, and this will be his 3rd mission in an orbital spacecraft. Here's more on the first international partner to fly aboard Crew-Dragon.
Soichi appears
Hey,
to be a very quiet
Mr. Anderson, we missed you.
comes out with some fantastic one-liners.
Suichi is probably the quietest, but he is probably the funniest as well. Earlier, I used the word dignified to describe him, but his humor is very dry and subtle, but it is extremely witty, and it just makes it that much more funny.
Konnichiwa. My name is Soichi Noguchi. I am Mission Specialist 1 on CREW-1 mission to international.
ああ、日本語が。私は日本語が少しわかります。でもまだ上手じゃありません。
Support the commander and pilot on Crew-Dragon, and of course, once I arrive on the space station, I'll be a board engineer and do lots of science and maintenance and spacewalks, robotics, all kinds of work.
All kinds of
Very
work.
fortunate enough to have a good crew member and obviously we have a lot of a different background, and the diversity definitely gives us a great rigidity to our crew. I wanted to be an astronaut for a long time. High school days, I watched the shuttle launch. I studied aerodynamics and aerospace engineering. When I turned 30, the Japanese Space Agency started recruiting another astronaut class. I was fortunate enough to be selected and sent immediately to Johnson Space Center. My first flight was 2005. That was on Space Shuttle Discovery, SPACEX, and the next flight was 2009. It was on the Russian Soyuz. The vehicle is definitely like living creature. All the pipes, all the pipelines are alive. I really remember the morning of the launch day. I arrived at the pad. Hey, this vehicle is alive and waiting to go up. I'm really looking forward to go back to that launch day. The CREW-1 is the first operational spaceflight after the certification given by NASA. The important thing is this is brand new, designed from scratch, 21st century spacecraft, and this is a new design. And obviously the SpaceX did a very nice job. The spacecraft of this century is not just for America, but this is an international corporation, and all the other people around the world have a chance to ride on this crew drive. So this is a new era.
Okay, we're looking live now inside the White Room. You can see
Negative. We're going to go to Pad Hatch reopen temporarily.
Okay, so it sounds like they may be reopening the hatch.
Uh-oh, reopening the
Listen
hatch.
and to see if we can hear any more chatter about that.
Somebody forgot their towel. Exciting.
Okay, so it sounds like they want to double check a leak check. So we may see that hatch reopen momentarily.
Okay. So now we need suspense music. This is way too groovy to be suspense music.
Nominally, we would expect right about now to hear a call out for hatch close right at T-minus 1 hour and 55 minutes. So we haven't heard that just yet, but we did hear that the teams are looking at reopening the hatch to double check some leaks.
So what I'm hearing is that the closeout team saw a little bit of a pressure drop during those leak checks. So like I mentioned before, it's not like closing a door, right? Or it's not closing the door to your car. The door closes. They check the environments inside the capsule, make sure we're good. Then they perform a leak check again, essentially making sure that the cabin and the door are able to maintain pressure and environments. So something like this, if they have to reopen it, it might just be they have to reposition a seal. So we're considered
this
a
is
minor
exciting.
issue at the moment, but it might be simple
We need
as
suspense music.
allowing us to open the hatch, check the seals and a latch mechanism, and then able to reclose it.
Okay, we're going to go over to John Innsbrucker in Hawthorne. He's been listening to some more
So there's-
details. John, can you give us an update on what's going on now?
Yeah, Marie, I've been listening into the Dragon nets in addition to Falcon 9. Right now you can see on the screen the crew inside Dragon. Everything is safe at the launch pad. We have not gotten into propellant load. What we were doing is our standard procedures. We did communications check that you heard a while back. They checked the environmental. Hey, the temperature was just right for the crew inside. And then we command to close the hatch. The team then locks it down. And we run a leak check just to make sure that it is leak tight. we're running that leak check, and they saw a little bit of a drop in pressure. So what you're seeing on the screen right now from the outside of the capsule on the left, the SPACEX ingress team in the access arm in the white room, they're going to open that hatch back up again. One thing they want to look at is just make sure nothing got trapped in the seal. They're going to take a look at the latch mechanism. They also are checking their equipment to make sure that it's, try to make sure whether or not it's actually in the capsule or it might be in the measuring equipment that they're holding on to. So you can see right now the latch or the hatch has come open, and they are beginning the troubleshooting, taking a look around the seals of the hatch.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that we do have about 10 minutes of margin in the schedule for this troubleshooting.
And 10 minutes before they need to start closing the hatch again?
That is correct. Yeah, 10 minutes till hatch close, and they are taking a look at the CO at this time.
Okay, copies.
I'm only listening to program now.
Okay, this is suspenseful. Maybe some leak issue. Are we getting a scrubbed launch already? That would be weird. Exciting.
Hey Marie, this is John. Did you ask me a question? I didn't pick it up.
Yeah, I wanted to first just acknowledge that we heard on the call outs that they said that they had about 10 minutes of margin in the schedule, so not necessarily going to throw the timeline off track, but is this something, I know that people that are watching this live have got to be wondering, is this something that can cause a scrub, or how significant is this issue right now?
Well, I'd say from a crew safety standpoint, which is what we're always looking out for, if we could not resolve the issue, if we thought we were actually measuring a leak, then that would be a probable scrub issue for today. However, it's premature to say that. They're doing the first round of troubleshooting. And yeah, I also heard the comment we've got about 10 minutes, but as a reminder, the SPACEX team doesn't actually leave the crew access arm until T-minus 60 minutes. So while we've got standard margin, they may be able to compress other activities since there's still 50 minutes before the crew that you see.
This is exciting.
Black pad access uniforms actually has to get out of the area.
Or am I easily excited? I don't know.
And when we put out the mission timeline ahead of time so folks can follow along, but we understand and we try to impress upon others that these are the kinds of things that can come up, and so this timeline, while it's a guide, it is fluid.
Thinking back to demo 2, if I remember correctly, they were also running ahead of schedule in terms of when Bob and Doug got in their seats and strapped in and closed the hatch. So obviously, given an instantaneous launch window for the space station launches, if we didn't have margin, that would be a potential scrub scenario. But like we heard the call out earlier, we're about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. So glad to have that flexibility.
Yeah, just to add on to what Kate was saying, looking back over my notes, when we did the first Demo 2 launch, it wasn't until about right now in the countdown that the first hatch would get completed. So by that schedule, which we were ready to support launch right on time until the weather came down, we're still looking good, I think, in the countdown.
Something I want to point out, you heard me mention earlier that the team is working off of tablets following along with the procedures. This is considered the kind of contingency procedure that is written into the procedure. So what we're seeing them go through on screen now, they're not, while they are troubleshooting live, we do have a procedure written for this type of contingency. So it's a matter of working through those side steps essentially.
wonder, did you have any issues that had to be worked
So this is
through
exciting.
real time on either of your shuttle missions that might have been similar to something like this?
So they have some issue
in
with the
both
pressure.
cases, actually, and it's really amazing how the
They're
team
opening
just
the
comes
door
together
again,
and
apparently.
works those procedures like Kate mentioned, where we've tried our best to think about what could go wrong in in these different scenarios, and then put those procedures in place to work it. And as a crew inside, unless there's something that we can actively participate in, we're just following along to make sure that everything is picking back up onto the timeline, and then waiting in case there is some switch to throw or communication to have to help with the procedure.
Okay, so again, if you're just joining us, we're at T-minus 1 hour and 47 minutes. We did not hear the call out of hatch closure yet because when they were going through the leak check process, they noticed a pressure drop inside the capsule. So they opened the hatch back up, and as John and I explained, there is some margin in the schedule, and so this is not necessarily a showstopper. It would be premature to speculate about any of that. So far, we are still on track for launch. We're just watching some troubleshooting in real time.
On the right-hand side of the screen, we can see the crew sitting pretty comfortably there in their seats. Something I didn't get to mention earlier is that the seats themselves are custom sized for each astronaut. So not only is the length of the bucket, so basically the length from the tailbone to your shoulders, that is specific for each astronaut, but so is the footrest as well as the armrest. So expecting to fly people of many different heights and wanting to make sure that their positioning is not only operational but comfortable as well. And it seems like everyone's pretty comfy in there.
And we can't overstate how important the job is of this pad closeout team who is doing these leak checks and making sure that that hatch is secure and behaving the way it should be before they leave the pad, because these 4 astronauts are inside a capsule that is going to be fueled in a little over an hour and head off to space. And so it's the job of these people that you see on the left of your screen, in addition to hundreds and thousands more around the country that have been working so hard for months and years to keep this crew safe. Again, this is the first operational or rotation mission of 4 people on Crew Dragon, the first of hopefully many more to come. And so the team has to keep the crew safe.
So I'm now
So we're
hearing
watching
that,
the
that
SPACEX
closeout
stuff
team
while
that we saw
making
there
music,
were able
because why
to
not?
Check the seals and clean them a little bit. They found a little piece of FOD.
Normally I
there
only
in
make
the seal,
music.
so
I
that's
don't
probably
normally
what's
watch
causing,
SPACEX while
the
doing it.
hatch to
That's
not
because they're
make
launching
pressure.
CREW-1
So
now.
They are about to, I can't quite tell on the screen, but they will be starting to close that.
And what is FOD for people who don't know the acronym?
Foreign object debris.
Okay. So what's an example of what that could be?
It's hard to tell because it depends on the environment, but something as small as a piece of lint to, something like our cell phone or an earring. So
Okay.
that's part of the reason why earlier in the webcast I mentioned that the the suit technician team are checking to make sure nobody's wearing unapproved earrings or jewelry. Those are all considered FOD or foreign object debris. But it looks like we're going to be closing that hatch again if it's not already, and reperforming that leak check. Like I mentioned before, we do have contingencies built into our procedures. We are running ahead of schedule, so nothing to speculate causing an abort at this time. But that being said, we will be repressurizing that hatch. And I should say that it's not like we bring it to pressure and check it. It's good. You want to bring it to pressure, allow it to sit there for a couple of minutes and watch whatever the decay is, if any.
Dragon SpaceX for status.
This looks like we're good. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, the team did find a possible root cause. They are checking cabin environments, and we're getting ready to close the hatch again.
That's copy. That has no prep.
Copy.
communicating to the crew inside Dragon, giving them a status update, letting them know that potential root cause has been found and that they will be closing that hatch and beginning the leak check once again.
So we heard that they may have identified the root cause, but we haven't heard what that root cause is or what they suspect it is yet. So if we hear that, we will relay that to you, but that is not information that we have heard just yet.
And Dragon SpaceX hatch is closed.
Dragon copies for the same.
Okay, so we heard hatch is closed, and so we expect a leak check to be forthcoming. Again, we've got the pad closeout team on the left of your screen, closing the Dragon side hatch for the second time, getting ready to do another leak check. And the crew is sitting tight on the right-hand side of the screen.
So we see them performing the mechanical sealing of the hatch. After this is complete, we'll begin the leak check.
We are at T minus 1 hour and 40 minutes, so with still some margin in the schedule, so this is not necessarily going to throw the rest of the launch timeline off track, but we're just standing by to see if the teams can get this issue resolved.
Okay, this was more exciting than I had expected. I was expecting this would be super dull and nothing would happen.
Okay, it
For
sounds
like
we've got
hours?
an update from John Innsbrucker and Hawthorne.
Otherwise, I
John,
wouldn't have
what can
started
you
making
tell us?
music. So, sorry about that.
Well, Marie, right now we're just inside 100 minutes until the Falcon 9 launch. We're waiting right now to hear the results of the hatch leak check. The second one's going on. As we've mentioned, we think we found a little bit of debris in the seal, and fingers crossed that we're going to do that. We're also waiting to hear the comp checks between the Dragon crew and the Falcon 9 launch team, the responsible engineers down in the firing.
Dragon SpaceX for status.
To catch up right now, as I mentioned, we're just inside of 100 minutes.
Okay, go ahead for Dragon.
Okay, the leak check hardware is connected and we're holding pressure now. Still in progress.
Dragon copies, and that's good news.
And I will provide some more words on what they identified during my post-ingress brief.
Okay, Dragon copies, and I assume we still have some more time on the leak check.
That's affirmed. Yeah, they're still performing it.
Okay.
Okay, we heard a little bit of chatter. I'm not sure if y'all picked it up on the webcast, but they talked briefly to the crew, gave them an update similar to one we were just presenting y'all. The good news is that they are farther along in the leak check right now than they got the first time. So again, things are going in the right direction. section the second time around. They're also looking at a timeline for the crew ingress team that you see there on the left monitor, the SPACEX folks. They will be able to leave a little bit later than T-1 hour and still be able to get clear of the area in plenty of time for us to do propellant loading and the launch. Now, right now on the Falcon 9, we're waiting to do the comm check with the crew. Our launch engineers for the launch vehicle, they are in firing on 4.
SpaceX for Falcon 9 comm check.
And here comes the comm check. Let's listen in.
And go ahead for Falcon 9 contact.
Okay, if you are ready, we are going to kick those off.
Dragon's ready.
Dragon, GNC on countdown 1, comm check.
And GNC, this is Dragon on countdown 1. Have you loud and clear.
GNC loud and clear, stand by for comm check by propulsion. Dragon, prop on countdown 1, comm check.
And prop Dragon on countdown 1. Have you loud and clear.
Is the excitement over? That was riveting. Totally riveting. That was really exciting.
Prop loud and clear, stand by for comm check with avionics engineer.
Dragon avionics on countdown 1, comm check.
Avionics, this is Dragon on countdown 1. I have you loud and clear.
Avionics on clear, stand by for comm check by the ground segment engineer.
Dragon ground segment on countdown 1, comm check.
Ground segment, this is Dragon on countdown 1. We have you loud and clear.
Ground segment loud and clear, stand by for comm check by launch control.
Dragon launch control on countdown 1, comm check.
Launch control, this is Dragon on countdown 1. Loud and clear.
Launch control loud and clear, stand by for
Maybe
comm
this
check
is
by
the bad idea. I'm actually not making. I'm just watching the NASA stream. You want me to stop make music? I will just post NASA together
This is
instead.
Dragon, Hans. We have
I
you
can do
loud
that.
and clear on countdown.
CE loud and clear. This completes the Falcon 9 responsible engineer comm checks. Safe flight.
Dragon.
This actually has.
Okay, the good
Come
news
on.
is we've gotten through the comm checks between the SpaceX team and the Dragon capsule. We're at T-1 hour and 34 minutes. The Falcon 9, everything
Dragon
continues to look
SpaceX
good. Big
for
event really
Testing.
coming
launch escape
Just
checks.
propellant loading as we get inside T-minus 35 minutes.
And go ahead
Dragon
and
side.
attach close checklist.
Testing. There we go.
Okay, resilience. At this time, we're going to commence health check for the launch escape system. You can expect a momentary flight computer state change followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
Dragon copies, and we're monitoring.
Testing.
Okay, I think we've got a moment now listening to them talk to the crew. On Dragon, other than the side hatch leak check that's been going underway, everything else has been looking good. On the weather front, the good news is that while we've been watching for rain showers in the
Test.
trajectory of the Falcon 9, we've been
Test.
watching for
Okay.
heavy rain or thick clouds. Currently, everything does continue
This
to
has
cooperate
interesting
as we're
historical
hoping the
precedent.
frontal boundary was slowing down and may not reach.
When I made my first album back in 1997, The Curvature of
Right now, that
Space,
continues to look like it's going to happen.
one of the tracks on that
So
album is me playing
local
live together with the
conditions are
space
good.
shuttle.
Upper altitude
Well, it
winds,
was
we're
me
looking at the
dialing into
balloons
NASA
we've
radio,
been releasing,
and it's all in
and those
background
show us that conditions
while
in
the
upper
space
altitude
shuttle does a
for
deorbit burn.
stability
The track
are
is called
good.
Deorbit
So
Burn.
we ought to be go
So
for
this is
launch
kind of
in
like
about
that, but the other
92 minutes
direction.
if the weather cooperates, and of course the range is ready to go. So right now we're going to throw it back to Daryl while we wait for follow-on discussions.
John, thank you very much for that update, and we're here at the Kennedy Space Center, of course, and I can confirm for you, John, weather is looking good right here. Just a thin layer of clouds overhead right here at the launch complex. I'm joined now by Deputy Administrator Jim Morehart for NASA here, and we appreciate him coming to talk a little bit about licensing of these launches, and that's a new thing around here, Jim, because previously that's not something that we heard a lot about, but we understand that this launch is the first commercially licensed launch by the FAA. So explain to me why that is and how that works.
It has just been certified for the first time. We licensed a lot of launches. We had 29 launches that were licensed in 2020, and we're expecting another 56 in 2021. So it's going exponential, and we're excited about that. We've really collaborated with the Federal Aviation Administration, which is part of the Department of Transportation. Steve Dixon is the administrator. He's here right now. He's been with us through the week, working with us, which is just tremendous. There's a great collaboration between the two agencies.
So help the public kind of understand what this means. I think, generally speaking, we all understand that we get aboard a commercial aircraft. It's that carrier is FAA licensed. So now we're licensing space flight, launches, commercial ones with people on board. So what does that, what does the public take away from that?
You think about it, we have the most complex airspace in the world over the United States. And now we're going to expand it even more into space. And so we're really integrating both our aeronautics, our aircraft that we fly, enjoy every day, with space operations. So we're going to have both those things happening at the same time with human spaceflight. And that's what we're doing here today at the Kennedy Space Center.
That's impressive. And just when you mentioned the airspace in flight, right? Very crowded place. Space just getting started, and as you mentioned, growing. Where do you see this, when you just kind of dream a little bit, where do you see this going one day?
Daryl, if you think about it, first off, it's both the Federal Aviation Administration, but at NASA also, our number one priority is safety. That's what we're focused on. But in the meantime, we're commercializing low Earth orbit. Right now we have a $350 billion space economy in low Earth orbit.
That's a big number.
It is a big number.
350 billion.
And people are talking in the future it going to over $1 trillion. And so it is just, we're starting the dawn of a new space age.
And quickly, I think you were telling me that this also increases our ability to do science on the International Space Station, right?
With these 4 great astronauts, and Jim Bridenstine and I met with them yesterday, and they want to fly, and we want to make sure they fly safely. But with that, when they get to the space station, we've got 1 astronaut there right now. It's going to increase our research efforts up there by 300%. And we really believe that that demand is going to grow. And the hope is ultimately that we'll have commercial space stations that are built by our space industry in the United States. And so, because there's so much research to be done.
All right. Well, very good. Illuminating information about the licensing of spaceports. Appreciate your efforts and all your work in getting these government agencies to work together and talk to each other and come together with some consensus there. That's good stuff.
It's my honor, but this is about safety, and we're going to keep doing it.
Excellent. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Jim. Jim Morehart, Deputy Administrator with NASA. And we are now at T-minus 1 hour and 28 minutes. We'll toss it back to John I. in Hawthorne, California. John? Well, maybe not John. We'll go to Marie, right here across the way at KSC.
All right, thanks, Daryl. I've got a brother named John, so I'll answer to either. We are standing by for a post-ingress briefing to the crew.
SPACEX or side hatch leak check.
And go ahead for the side hatch leak check.
Okay, good news. The leak check has passed, and we saw consistent readings.
The
of what we
leak
saw
check
in the
has
So it looks
passed.
good.
Joy.
That's great news, SpaceX.
So what you just heard there was the coordinator briefing the crew, letting them know that the leak check passed, and we're going to be moving along in the timeline here. They're now attaching the final exterior cover there on the side hatch.
The leak check has passed. Leak check has passed.
And they mentioned that the levels that they checked were consistent with dry dress. They were referring to the rehearsal that was conducted Thursday. Just a couple of days ago, they went through this process. It's called the dry dress rehearsal because they do everything except fuel up the rocket and, of course, launch. So when they did the checks that day, obviously things were nominal. The first time they closed the side hatch, they noticed a drop in pressure when they did the leak check. So they opened the hatch back up, discovered some foreign object debris, or what we call FOD, cleared that out. We don't know what exactly it was yet. We might hear about that in the post-ingress briefing. But they closed the hatch back up, did another leak check. Everything looks nominal, and that's what we just heard confirmation of. So that they said that was great news. So it sounds like we're getting back on track now.
So it looked like that closeout team member just took the final closeout photo there, or one of final, and we are moving along. If you look closely on the right-hand side, you might be able to make out some signatures there on the wall of our white room.
Certainly the astronauts sitting inside the Crew Dragon capsule right now appreciate the attention to detail of this pad closeout team.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Marie, it's interesting. I think one of the things we definitely appreciate is that the team that works here with us on these spacecraft absolutely believe that the care and feeding of those spacecraft is their responsibility, and we know that.
I like the ninja guys.
Hear them
The
outside the hatch
SpaceX
and on the radio as well.
fixer-upper thingamajig people look like
Hey, can you
ninjas.
explain what we're seeing now?
That's awesome.
It's a little difficult for me to see on the screen. I'm sorry, I can't tell what they're doing.
It is a little off, it's above the frame of the camera view that we can see.
Are there things they have to remove before the seal with the hatch can pull back?
No, there's nothing necessarily attached to the capsule, but I would like to point out, again, we're not only taking into consideration the safety of the crew, but the safety of our team members as well. You can see the straps there. I believe what they're doing is they're basically allowing, so there's a mechanism there on the crew access arm. There's kind of like an airplane door. It doesn't, the metallic pieces don't go anywhere near close to the airplane, but there's a little bit of a seal there to try and control the environment. Again, dealing with humidity and rain and bugs here in Florida, trying to keep all of that out and keep the environment stable and under control there. But yeah, so they are now preparing to move all of that fixturing away, and they are leaning out over towards essentially the side of the rocket. So we have those wires in place for fall protection.
So we should be hearing any time now a post-ingress briefing. That's what we're expecting for the crew inside to kind of get a recap. Okay, so maybe a couple more minutes before we hear that briefing. So we're going to move on temporarily. We've made mention of the first crew to launch in Crew-Dragon a little earlier this year, and you may remember them as the Space Dads, as they are affectionately known by the NASA and SpaceX teams who work with them. We watched them lift off from this very spot back in May, ending a 9-year gap in human spaceflight from American soil. And we want to honor the courage of NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley with a look at their historic Demo 2 test flight.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check, ground stations.
SpaceX Dragon, we're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
3, 2, 1. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew-Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, spot a dog.
On behalf of the entire launch team, thanks for flying with Falcon 9 today. We hope you enjoyed the ride and wish you a great mission.
We would like to welcome you aboard Capsule Endeavour. We do have a friend on board with us, Trimmer, the Apatosaurus. I think I was requested to do a backflip. Good night, Megan and Theo. And Karen and Jack.
MD Houston flight. Houston is go for undocking and departure.
Dragon is committed to undock.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground. We are ready for the systems brief.
Copy. As stated, Dragon's in a healthy state. We are proceeding toward the primary landing site, and your timeline is current. Visual, 2 drones out.
300 meters. We are braced for splashdown.
Copy, brace for splashdown. Endeavour, on behalf of the SpaceX and NASA teams, welcome back to planet Earth. Thanks for flying.
Yeah, this is just adds self-congratulatory stuff. What's happened here?
Just an hour and 16 minutes until launch. And so I want to know about a conversation that you guys had. You had some important conversations with this crew. What did you tell them? What advice did you give them?
What's the bleepy noise coming from? What the? Okay, my clavinet turned into a bleepy noise. Why? That's my clavinet again. I kinda like the bleepy noise though, to be fair, but what the hell? Okay, there's not much happening right now. They're just talking. This is just a replay from before.
kill system, or in this case, it's the grid fin system that's in proximity in that area. They believe it's water. They briefed the crew, and again, that issue is now closed out. So coming up on just inside T-minus 1 hour and 12 minutes, we've closed up our couple issues, and as we also heard just a couple minutes ago, the closeout team has left the crew access arm, so we're looking good on schedule. So Jesse, everything in the very busy last 20 minutes or so has come together and closed out. What else has been going on?
That is awesome news, John. Thank you for that very detailed update. We're just 1 hour and 11 minutes from launch, and it just keeps getting more and more exciting, especially with those updates coming in. Since arriving at the spacecraft, the crew were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks which were successful, and communications checks with the core here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and tracking and data relay satellites that will use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
And after those suit checks, we were looking for the leak check on the hatch. So we closed the hatch, and as John and I explained, there were some pressure changes, and so they reopened the hatch, removed what appears to be a piece of foreign object debris or FOD, reclosed the hatch, conducted those leak checks, and everything has come out well. So the closeout team is departing the pad, and weather operators are kicking off the final check on wind speeds at the pad, and that'll be used for the final go, no-go poll for launch. Before we get to that final go, no-go, the various teams at both NASA and SpaceX will do an internal go poll, making sure conditions are right with the Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in on Houston for a status on the team supporting the space station on their readiness for launch. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Leah. The team here at Mission Control Houston remains go for launch. All systems on board the station that require for it to be healthy for mission are continuing to look good. Before the station team is go for launch, they verify that key systems on board the station are functioning as expected. This includes life support systems like oxygen generation, carbon dioxide removal, and the water recycling system that allows us to reuse about 9% of the water we send to station. We're also ensuring that the computers that allow us to command the station's major subsystems, essentially the station's nervous system, are functioning normally. We also work with our Russian counterparts to ensure both methods of controlling the station's attitude or the direction the station is pointing are fully functional. This includes the large U.S. gyroscopes and the thrusters found in the Russian segments. Both systems play a critical role during Dragon stocking. Mission Control Houston will be closely monitoring the crew's flight and checking off milestones for most of the journey. Lead NASA Flight Director of CREW-1, Anthony Varia, will lead flight controllers in Houston for launch, and they will all be coming back tomorrow for docking, where we join joint operations with SpaceX. So I'll send it back over to you, Marie at KSC.
All right, thank you, Shaniqua. If you are just now joining us, you picked a great time as we are now at T-minus 8 minutes and 22 seconds until launch. Welcome to coverage for the mission known as CREW-1, NASA and SpaceX's second flight with crew to the International Space Station. Liftoff time is still holding for 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time, instantaneous launch window, and we are tracking no issues currently with Falcon 9 or Crew Dragon. The range is green and weather is cooperating so far. Last check, it was 50% go. Over the last 3 hours, our crew of Victor Glover...
I was worried there for a second that it said 8 minutes, but it was 1 hour and 8
SpaceX
minutes.
spacesuits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room. They walked out of that crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport in Florida has done since Apollo 7. They were then transported to the pad, where our crew entered the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft you see live on your screen at the Falcon 9 rocket.
Well, this is SpaceX's second time flying astronauts in Crew Dragon. It will also be the first time a private company will fly a crew of 4 people to the space station. If you remember back in May, we launched NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken to the space station strapped into their seats, and they've already gone through all of their communication and suit leak checks. Now, they are able to follow along with all of the action still ahead on the displays that are just above them. There are a couple of touchscreen displays, and that allows them to get insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed down towards launch. So we're currently at T-minus 1 hour and 5 minutes. Let's check in with John Innsbrucker for another status update on both vehicles. How's it going there, John?
One hour, 5 minutes.
Clear the VDA. Once that's complete, we're going to cycle the tank valves to equalize the manifold pressure. This is the same thing we executed yesterday, earlier this week during dry jobs.
We copy that, and Jim, your call's coming in a little bit soft, and we're bringing it kind of at the end of it.
Copy all on that call, and I'll let you know when we're ready for that tank valve cycle.
We've just heard a little bit of just inside T-minus 62 minutes. We are go for launch.
Great to hear, John. Sounds like everything is going back to normal, is that right? We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and earlier this year we completed a test run of the mission that we're just an hour away from beginning here today.
And the purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly humans to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 2 was a truly exciting moment and paved the way for today's mission.
Dragon SpaceX valve cycling is complete.
And good
international experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As Leah mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 23 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 22 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle. It's fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but also features full manual override capabilities in case of emergency. Bob Bankin and Doug Hurley tested these capabilities during the Demo 2 mission to the station.
Many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at some of these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from bottom of the trunk to top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon is composed of two main elements.
SpaceX, just passing T-minus 1 hour. Your go for Section 6 when ready. Report go for launch.
Dragon copy. Section 6 is in work.
Minus 1 hour, we're getting there. But the capsule that the crew is flying on today is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and it also has an unpressurized section known as the trunk.
The nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system and also the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts.
Opposite the nose cone is the trunk. It provides attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and cargo. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using SpaceX's new Pika tiling technology. The other half contains solar cells used to charge the spacecraft's batteries.
The spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo.
And SpaceX, this is Dragon Resilience for 6.4 of 4.100 launch prep. Dragon is go for launch.
Copy, go for launch. Yeah, we're looking good on weather, and you can expect the next call to be the C brief at T-minus 45.
And very exciting. Very exciting. We just got confirmation that Dragon is go for launch. The next call coming up will be from the launch director. So exciting that we are on target for T0 today. Back to what we were talking about, the seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board.
That control panel is centered between the pilot and the commander seats. You can see it a little bit here on the right side of your screen. That consists of 3 touchscreen displays allowing the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually.
And finally, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And we are now T-minus 57 minutes from launch. This day is the beginning of regular crew flights to the space station from U.S. soil, NASA having certified SpaceX for these missions after the successful Demo 2 flight test, which launched in May and splashed down safely in August.
Today's mission will be Crew Dragon's second mission with astronauts aboard, and its first long-duration mission to the International Space Station. It's been an awesome countdown so far. Weather is still looking good. We just
countdown. The technical team has been pulled and is ready to proceed into the propellant load. Thank you.
Not only is weather good, but sounds like we're proceeding into propellant load. So we're at T-minus 56 minutes and 37 seconds, and we're just getting closer and closer to that T0. So exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great countdown today. Of course, a few things we didn't expect, but nonetheless, everything's continuing on schedule. So starting with suit up, just over 3 hours ago, the SpaceX team helped the crew put on their suits and conduct initial checkouts before crew walkout. Crew walkout was where Victor Glover, Mike Hawkins, Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi gave final goodbyes with friends and family gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they began that roughly 20-minute ride to pad 39A.
And what a cool ride that was. What you're seeing on your screen is them getting into their vehicles, waving goodbye. We got some great footage of those Teslas heading down the NASA Causeway before the crew arrived at the pad. And once they got to the pad, they took a minute to take in the sights. There you can see on your screen. They took some
So we're doing
pictures and then they
SpaceX
headed
Watch
up into the fixed service structure to begin
while
what's
making
also
music.
known as crew ingress.
Because
The
why not?
astronauts entered the vehicle, and the SpaceX
There's literally
crew
no
went through
reason.
a series of checks to ensure their suits, the seats,
Well, there's
and
probably
vehicle
some reason,
interactions
but I
are
don't
all
care.
functioning properly.
I want to see SpaceX fly.
5.72 is open for propellant load, go, no-go, bias.
That's the team continuing to discuss the go, no-go for propellant load. But about 15 minutes ago, the team closed Dragon's hatch with the crew safely inside. So with about 55 minutes to go until Dragon starts breathing fire, things will pick up as we get close to that go, no-go to begin propellant loading and arming the launch escape system.
The crew will pull for readiness, which was completed just about 5 minutes ago. And the Dragon pull for prop loading was just called out not too long ago. Next up at T-minus 45 minutes will be an internal mission control Hawthorne pull, and then the launch director's pull for propellant loading. When we get to about T-minus 40 minutes, the crew access arm will retract, and the crew will get the call to close their visors and arm the launch escape system. This is the automated system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And then once we reach about T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading for Falcon 9 will begin. We've heard some chatter about whether they're go, no-go, continuing those polls. And throughout the countdown, we've been getting some pretty incredible views of the astronauts inside Dragon, making their final preparations as well as some close-up views of the suits. The teams have often described those suits as an extension of the Dragon spacecraft. It's almost a mini spacecraft inside a spacecraft. They're all custom fitted, just as we were discussing earlier. And I think it's very interesting as well, their seats are custom fitted too. So nobody gets to really choose where they sit today. It's already been decided. And with that, we want to hear a little bit more from the
For this place.
And go ahead for displays.
I just wanted to check. We did notice that on the left side of the display looks like possibly one of the iPads, one of the tablets is still in there. Is there when are you planning on bringing that down?
And we're going to get that right prior to the LAS Army.
Copy all.
That's the core speaking with Dragon. The crew also has some tablets they can use to monitor the milestones of the mission. But for right now, we want to hear a little bit more from the KSC side. So, Daryl.
Thank you very much. Back here at the Kennedy interview desk, and we talk a lot about the astronauts, what they're doing, and the preparation for good reason. But they have a lot of work to do. They're going to be doing some science. And joining me now is Dr. Lucy Lowe from the National Institutes of Health with one of the hundreds of experiments that our astronauts are going to be working on. And so one of them, the big one that you're working on and studying, is called tissue chips. So, Lucy, what exactly is a tissue chip?
So, yeah, great question, Daryl, and thanks very much. Great to be here this evening. So, a tissue chip, this is an example of a tissue chip. It's a tiny bioengineered device that contains human cells, and it's designed so that it mimics the structure and function of human cells and organs in this tiny little device. And so the idea is that we can use these to understand human physiology, we can use them to model diseases, and we can even use them to test drugs and therapeutics in human systems before they go into humans, for example, in clinical trials. So really they're just models that we can use to model disease and then test therapeutics for safety and efficiency.
Taking actual tissue that's been genetically engineered, right? And to see how
Not necessarily, no. So there's lots of different ways that you can put cells on these chips. You can buy them, but you can also use stem cell technologies to actually create cells from all kinds of different organs and tissues: heart, liver, lungs, skin, brain, bone. Lots and lots of different kinds of tissues can be created from stem cells, and they can be put onto these tissue chips, and then you can model diseases and all sorts on a little chip like this.
Fascinating. We're looking at some video, I believe, of one of these tissue chips being put together. Kind of explain us through what we're seeing.
So what you're seeing there is one of our kidney chips that the tissue chip this chip here is being seeded here. You're seeing that blue fluid coming through in those little triangles, those little squares are cells that are being placed into the chip. And they're put in there with this pink stuff, this extracellular matrix that keeps them alive and keeps them bubbling away, happily chatting to each other over the course of a few weeks. And so what you're seeing there then, with the blue fluid coming through, is how we feed those cells during that time that they're up on the space station.
Gotta keep them alive.
Exactly. They need all their nutrients, they need all their stuff that keeps them feeling good up there.
So what is the benefit of an experiment like this? What can we glean from this and hopefully in the
Yeah,
future?
so that's a great question, Daryl. So when astronauts go up to the space station, they have a lot of changes that they see in their bodies that look very similar to certain kinds of disease states or even aging down here on Earth. So when we put cells onto tissue chips and we send them to the space station, we're able to see the same kinds of changes that might happen to the astronauts, but on a very, very short time scale. So for example, diseases that might take months or years or even decades to actually be a clinical problem down here on space, on Earth, can actually be modeled in space in just a couple of weeks. So we can really accelerate the disease modeling using these tissue chips and then see how different drugs and therapies act on them. So we're super excited that some of the CREW-1 folks might be doing some research for us. So thanks very much, guys.
Fascinating, and thank you very much, Dr. Lucy Lowe, for being with us here from the National Institutes of Health. That was a fascinating experiment, and we hope the astronauts get some good work on it so that you can further develop your research.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daryl.
All right, very good. And so now we'll toss it back to Hawthorne, California, and John I for the latest at T-minus 49 minutes and counting.
Thank you, Daryl. T-minus 49 minutes, 7 seconds, continuing to count down. Right now, the launch director and launch team are preparing for the readiness for propellant load and launch fall. SpaceX launch director has checked with the Dragon mission director and the NASA launch manager. They are ready to proceed. Currently, we're doing an electronic poll of the 7 members of the SpaceX launch team for their go to load propellant and then to press on with launch. The Falcon launch crew is located in Firing Room 4 in the Launch Control Center, adjacent to the historic Vehicle Assembly Building on Kennedy Space Center. Key NASA launch members are also located in the firing room. Now what we're waiting for right now is we expected about T-minus 47 minutes to hear the results of the poll. While we're waiting to hear that, a couple other status items. The crew is currently on board, and the crew access arm is about to be retracted. You can see the access arm currently in the pre-launch position alongside the Dragon capsule. We'll rotate that out of the way, then we'll arm the launch escape system on Dragon before we go into loading propellant on the Falcon 9. We're launching out of pad 39A, heading northeast out of the eastern range. The range continues to be go for launch. They're monitoring clearance area around the launch pad as well as the air and sea space around the flight corridor. Now the good news on the weather front, we have been given a new probability of violation of only 20%, or as the optimist would say, 80% chance of good weather. There's a small chance of a shower, but it would have to pop up pretty much right over the pad here at the last minute. They're looking, ground winds are cooperating, upper altitude winds are cooperating. So the weather officer gave us some good news about 10 minutes ago as we got inside of T-minus 1 hour. We're coming up on T-minus 47 minutes, and the SpaceX team is finishing up their go, no, go polls. We're waiting for a few more people to give the electronic thumbs up so that then the SpaceX launch director can check that item off and then proceed into the remainder of the countdown, which will include propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes. So let's listen in for a moment to the countdown track.
Dragon SpaceX for arm timeline.
And go ahead for the arm timeline.
Yeah, we were just talking here about the tablet, how much time you'll have to put it away. Essentially, as soon as the T-minus 45 minute brief occurs, we're going to begin retracting the arm, and we'd like to be ready to arm the launch escape system immediately, as soon as that's complete.
And Dragon copies. We will go ahead and take care of that now.
Copy all, thank you.
Heard a little bit of dialogue there Dragon crew looking at a computer notebook that they're getting ready to put away, letting the crew know what the timeline would be once we finish the go-no-go poll and we give the instructions to the launch team at T-minus 45. Then we'll proceed in retract of the access arm. You can see it's currently alongside of Dragon, and then we'll go into arming of the escape system, pardon me, years of previous experience, and then finally we will get into propellant loading. Right now they're getting just the last thumbs up. People have been looking at data that we were gathering just outside of T-minus 1 hour as we were doing final checkouts of the Falcon 9 on the propulsion and engine systems before we got into propellant load.
Poll is complete and the team is ready for crew access arm retract, propellant loading, and launch. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed into launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators advise launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. In the event of a fire alarm at firing port today, key operators noted below will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly south. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Copy, arming crew arm.
And there you've heard it, just inside 44 minutes, SpaceX launch director has announced polls are complete. We're go to head into propellant load. The Dragon team is going to begin retract of the crew access arm. So Kate, with that, everything continuing to look good. We're right on time in the countdown.
Thanks for that, John I.
And it looks like the crew access arm has already begun to retract away. It's just a beautiful sight.
So this is one of the last major visual milestones that we have before launch. So the crew access arm now moving away, and we are T-minus 43 minutes and 15 seconds from launch. We're standing by as we wait for completion of the crew access retract. Shortly thereafter, we should hear the call out that the launch escape system is armed. And after that, we will hear that F9 prop loading has begun.
And now, earlier this evening, we saw NASA astronauts Victor Glover, Mike Hopkins, Shannon Walker, and JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi suit up. That was about 3 hours ago. They made the drive out to Launch Complex 39A. Ingressed Crew Dragon about 2 hours ago, and the spacecraft hatch was closed a second time after and then they had a successful leak check. And again, we've just seen the crew access arm retract, and what we heard a few moments ago was that once this process is complete, they are going to go ahead and arm the launch escape system immediately. So we're going to wait to hear the call out that the crew access arm retraction is complete, and then we'll explain a little bit more about this launch escape system, what it is, why it's armed at this point, and why it's so significant. So again, we're at T-minus 41 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. We've just watched the crew access arm retract. That is the suspended walkway that attaches the rotating service structure to the fixed service structure, excuse me, I'm talking shuttle speak, to the Crew Dragon capsule. So we watched the arm retract away, so now we see Crew Dragon.
Crew arm stow is complete.
And we heard confirmation that crew arm movement
Dragon
is complete.
SpaceX, with that call, you are go for section 7,
closed visors and arm launch gates.
Okay, Jackson copies, move to section 7.
So there, confirmation from CORE telling CREW that they are allowed to move on. You hear us mention move on to section 6, section 7. That's simply making sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of which procedure we are now working toward. So that was just the CORE, who is the person that is essentially the single voice communicating to the crew inside.
Dragon, visors closed, arming the launch escape system.
Copy.
And there we heard Commander Mike Hopkins. Thank you. Commander Mike Hopkins informed that they are now closing their visors and now commanding the launch escape system to be armed. Now the launch escape system is basically the crew's path to safety in the event of an anomaly, quite simply. If we were to have an abort scenario here on the pad, we have demonstrated the efficiency and success of that system, having done a pad abort test. Previously, we did a launch escape system test mid-flight earlier, I believe it was January of this year. Mazarma, essentially, this is the system that all the way from now on the pad until they are in orbit, the crew would be able to escape safely in the event of an anomaly. That's why it is so important that we check the weather all around the world, really. It's not just the weather here at the Cape that we're looking at in order to determine if we're go or no-go. It is the weather along that entire escape corridor.
Right. And as Kate was mentioning, again, the launch escape system is armed. That has to happen before the SpaceX teams will proceed with fueling Falcon 9. And so that propellant loading process is set to begin at T-minus 35 minutes, so just a few minutes from now. And what that looks like, Kate, you talked about the tests that were done. You did a pad abort test back in 2015. You did an in-flight abort test at the beginning of this year. And so what that looks like in action, if it were to happen, a pad abort would be before liftoff at any point from propellant loading, which begins in just under 3 minutes now, until the moment of liftoff. If something were to go wrong and the crew were in danger, Crew Dragon can kind of act as a rocket on top of a rocket and propel itself off of Falcon 9 using its 8 built-in Super Draco thrusters, right? And so the idea is that if that happens, Crew Dragon would splash down off the coast, and then we would have a rescue scenario.
Correct.
And so we've rehearsed that ahead of time. We coordinate very closely, the NASA and SpaceX teams, with the Department of Defense Detachment 3 to prepare for a scenario such as that. We're also prepared for if there were to be a need for a launch escape after the point of liftoff. At any point from liftoff until they reach orbit, about roughly 12 minutes after liftoff. And at any point in that sequence, Crew Dragon could still launch itself off of the Falcon 9 rocket. And in that scenario, Crew Dragon would splash down at some other location further downrange, farther away from Florida, obviously. And that's why the weather downrange is just as important as the weather around the pad for liftoff, because they're thinking about how are we going to rescue the crew if we get into a scenario like that.
Exactly. So it's really complicated, but it is a system that we have spent a lot of time designing and testing, and it's definitely
This is to get it a little too
considered
exciting.
in terms of that weather criteria that we do.
I don't know. How long is it left?
So now at T-minus 36 minutes and 20
36
seconds,
minutes.
in just over a minute, we should be hearing that Falcon 9 is ready for propellant loading. That'll be with the RP-1, which is rocket-grade kerosene, and then also simultaneously the liquid oxygen loading will begin.
I'm crazy that excited about this space
As
stuff.
we begin loading that liquid oxygen, we'll see plumes of what will appear to be white smoke. It's actually the liquid oxygen vaporizing, turning from liquid form into gas form around the rocket itself in the rather humid Florida air.
And Nicole, I know we're just about 30 30 seconds from fueling, but from your perspective, obviously this launch escape capability is not something that the space shuttle has. So from an astronaut's perspective, what's your take on having the ability to abort from the pad or in flight?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's what we need to be doing with our spacecraft, and I think anytime you can better ensure the survival of your crew in any situation during, launch and on the way to space, that's what we need to be doing.
Launch auto sequence has started. Propellant load has started.
We just heard that call that propellant load has started. That means fueling of
No,
Falcon
I
9
think
has
I'm
begun.
gonna leave you guys to do this streaming on your own. I need to watch this on the big screen. I
Okay,
want to
so
see
we are
this
now
thing
at T-minus
fly.
34 minutes, 34 seconds and
I
counting.
hope it was
Fueling of
a little
Falcon
bit
9
fun.
is underway. The launch escape system is armed.
Anyway.
And again, today is the first in a series of 6-month missions for
I'm gonna
NASA's
wish you a
Critical
good night.
program. And the Dragon capsule was loaded with propellants about a week and a half ago, just a few miles down the road from us.
It's an area that we affectionately refer to as Dragonland.
Yep. And in order to fly, Dragon needs fuel and an oxidizer. So for the fuel we use, Kate, you're going to have to help me with these words.
No
I can't
problem.
pronounce them.
Yeah, so it's monomethylhydrazine, or MMH, and nitrogen texoxide, or tetroxide, for also known as NTO for the oxidizer. These are two propellants, a fuel and an oxidizer, that when they come into contact, they combust instantaneously. So it's a great propellant to use in spaceflight because you don't need an ignition source. So we use those propellants to maneuver Dragon on orbit, and those propellants super power the Draco engines as well as the 8 Super Draco engines that would be utilized in the launch escape system in an abort scenario.
And again, we want to be crystal clear. Now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means that the 8 Super Draco engines built into Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule away from the Falcon 9 rocket in an instant if there is any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or on the pad. Now let's go over to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for an operations update. John?
Well, we are counting down those final minutes, and everything is still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch just under 33 minutes from now. As you heard, Falcon 9 began propellant loading right on time at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, the propellants that feed the Merlin engines that power Falcon 9 are two liquids. One liquid is the fuel, the other is an oxidizer. And that fuel is a refined form of kerosene, also referred to as RP1. Now, our oxidizer is densified liquid oxygen, also called LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles, and it takes up less volume. This allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called PTEB. When PTEB comes in contact with oxygen, it ignites, and it gives off a green-colored flame. Once we've got the flame going, we can then add the kerosene fuel into the chamber, and the engine goes to main power. And you might see the green flash just as the second stage engine ignites, following stage separation 2 minutes 48 seconds into tonight's flight. Now, currently we're early into propellant loading. The first stage fuel tank is about 10% full, and that first stage is the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle you can see on your screen. You've got the black carbon fiber landing legs, then the white propellant tanks of the first stage, topped off by that black cylinder, the inner stage. Now, liquid oxygen loading is also underway on the first stage. That loading will begin on the second stage, which you can see on your monitor, which is the cylinder, the white cylinder just above that black interstage. Liquid oxygen loading on stage 2 begins at T-minus 16.5 minutes. And we'll continue loading liquid oxygen on both stages until the last few minutes of the countdown. Helium loading into pressure vessels is also underway. We use that to pressurize the tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. Now, on board the Dragon spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded. Falcon 9, and the call out you just heard, ground letting the crew know that helium loading is going on the vehicle right now. So as I mentioned, the astronauts are listening to this right now. As part of their training in the simulator, we also can give them the playback of sounds that we've recorded in Dragon capsule during recent flights. Plus, they also had a discussion with Bob and Doug after their flight, who related what their flight experience was like earlier this year. Now out on the eastern range, we continue to hear they're green, ready to go. There are no problems, and they are go for launch. And finally, the weather, as I mentioned a little while ago, it's actually improved during the day. We're down to 20% probability of violation. The biggest thing we're watching is just in case in these last half hour, if a rain shower might spring up within a mile or two of the launch pad. But currently, the rain looks like it's holding off.
No.
The upper altitude winds
Too
are
many
good,
years
and
since I touched
ground
that
winds
thing.
are very light. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch
Someday.
time. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity just under 3 days from now. But let's turn it over to Jesse and Leah for an overview of events after liftoff.
Thanks, John. For CREW-1, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 27.5 hours, and their journey is much longer, but fairly similar to the trip NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken made earlier this year in CREW-1's
guys,
first mission with humans aboard.
As we await T0 in
We'll stop
just
making
about
this dumb
29
music
minutes,
now.
the ground operations teams are doing a series of system
You can
checks
find
to
this on
ensure
NASA
both
TV
Dragon
without my
and
stupidity
Falcon
on
9
top.
are ready for launch.
Was
You're
kind of
looking at a
interesting
live view of our teams on
experiment.
Cape as they prepare for liftoff.
I
Now,
say
as
good
we
night
wait
to you
for the launch
guys,
clock to hit
and,
zero, we wanted to give you an overview of what
zap
the
out.
ascent portion of the mission will look like.
I'll watch this in,
Once we hit
on a bigger
T0
screen.
and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and
Ciao.
Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their
Bye-bye,
ascent.
everybody.
At about 50 seconds into flight, Falcon's 9 engines will throttle down to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic
Good
pressure
night.
on the rocket,
Thank you for
or what we
watching.
typically refer to as max Q. It's worth
But I'm
noting
gonna
that
go
once we
to
hit
the
max
TV
Q,
now.
the vehicle will be going
Ciao.
supersonic.
Once we are through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle up our Merlin engines again. And from there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
First is MECO, or main engine cutoff. This is where all 9 Merlin N1D engines shut off in